So hi, welcome to this episode of History Hunters. We are in Chatsworth, California. It's a suburb of Los Angeles here at the Oakwood Memorial Park Cemetery. I'm excited because I'm here to talk about a Western figure, had a very colorful past, and I found that he's buried here at the cemetery. His name was Alfonso J. Jennings. If you've heard anything about him, he had a very colorful life, and I'll tell you about it on this episode. Sarah found some Canadian geese here in the cemetery, and there's like, what, 2, 4, 6, 8 of them over here. Not having anything to do with it though. Alfonso, or Al Jennings of Oklahoma, buried here. Lived from 1863 to 1961. It might seem odd that an attorney would become a train robber, but that's true of Jennings. He had the distinction of being probably the most inept outlaw of the Old West, a model of outlaw incompetence for the way that his train robberies turned out. In fact, on one occasion, he stood on the train tracks with a lantern and waving a flag to try to stop the engineer. The engineer kept on going, was ready to run him over. There was also another occasion when him and his gang were riding alongside the train, shooting their 6-shooters and making all kinds of motion for the engineer to stop the train. However, the engineer just stuck his head out the window, smiled, and kept on going. He probably realized those bullets couldn't penetrate the iron shell of a steam locomotive. There was another train robbery attempt on October 1st, 1897. A train had stopped to refill the water tank, and Al walked up to the baggage car. He used so much dynamite that he blew open the car. Blew it to smithereens, actually. There was no sign of any money or any safe. Another failed attempt at robbing a train. He was raised in Oklahoma and became a prosecuting attorney in Oklahoma's Canadian County from 1892 until 1894. And in 1895, he joined his brothers Ed and John in a law practice in Woodward, Oklahoma. Now, there was a rival attorney in town. His name was Temple Lee Houston. He was actually the son of Sam Houston. One day, while in the cabinet saloon with Al's brothers Ed and John, an argument ensued and guns were pulled. Houston shot Ed to death and wounded John. Houston was charged with murder, but he was acquitted. The acquittal angered Al, and he left the law profession. Now, to find his grave, it's in the D section, and ironically, the hills back there are kind of part of the hills that were filmed in a lot of westerns here. In fact, the Iverson Ranch is not very far away. Now, you wouldn't think that a train robber had any morals, but he had a code of conduct, and that was you never robbed from women or from preachers. Al had boasted once that he robbed between 15 and 20 trains in Oklahoma, Kansas, Arkansas, and Texas, but he wasn't very good at it. While attempting to rob a train near Edmond, Oklahoma on October 16th, 1897, the gang unsuccessfully attempted to break into a Wells Fargo safe. After the dynamite failed to blow up the safe, the gang made their getaway. No one was killed, but passenger Jim Wright refused to surrender his valuables and had part of his ear shot off.
Yes, I have been a train robber and a bank robber. That was back in 1895, 6, and 7. We went into it just like any other businessman would. I was tried in 27 different cases. I was acquitted of all but 2, and I was guilty of all but the 2. So that is a measure of justice as we sometimes find it in our courts. We have many honest judges and some honest lawyers, but most of them die young.
In the mid-1890s, while working as cowboys, Al and Frank Jennings decided to become outlaws by obtaining fake U.S. Marshals badges and using them to collect tolls from gullible trail herders moving their cattle through the Oklahoma Territory. They were later joined by several members of the Doolin Gang. Under Al's leadership, they plotted train robberies. During the summer and fall of 1897, the Desperados, often referred to as the Jennings Gang, composed of Frank and Al Jennings, Little Dick West, and Morris and Pat O'Malley, robbed trains, general stores, and a post office with little monetary success. Jennings boasted of killing 18 men, saying, quote, "I always shot them in the throat so they couldn't talk back," unquote. Historians say there is no record that Jennings actually ever killed anyone. He was known to exaggerate his gun skills, saying that he could shoot a tin can tossed into the air, but friends said Jennings couldn't hit the side of a barn. Jennings was popular on the lecture circuit and a favorite subject for interviewers because of his remarkable stories, like the one about the time he beat Jesse James in a shooting match, a feat all the more remarkable when you consider that Jesse James had been dead for many years when the alleged shooting match took place. Jennings' life of crime ended shortly after he was shot and wounded by law enforcement officials on November 30th, 1897, and captured a week later in McIntosh County, Oklahoma. In 1899, Jennings was sentenced to life in prison, but due to the legal efforts of his brother John, his sentence was reduced to 5 years. He was freed on technicalities in 1902 and received a pardon from President Theodore Roosevelt in 1904. From then on, Jennings led an honest life. In 1906, he married Maud Deaton Jennings, who was buried next to him. She died a month before he passed away. Jennings became a celebrity because of a chance encounter with a future budding writer who was serving time for embezzlement with Jennings at the Leavenworth prison. His name was William Sidney Porter. Jennings liked to talk and Porter liked to listen, so the two became good friends. When Porter left prison in 1904, he began writing under the name of O. Henry, and one of the first stories that he published was called Holding Up a Train, which was about Jennings. Jennings made his way to California, where he talked his way into the movie industry as a consultant and occasional actor in more than 100 westerns. He recreated one of his bank robberies in the 1908 film The Bank Robbery, in which Quanah Parker had a bit part. Jennings tried his hand in politics and failed in a 1912 run for Oklahoma County Attorney. In 1914, he ran for governor of Oklahoma. Enjoying the popularity of his starring role in the film adaptation of his 1913 biography, Beating Back, Jennings openly talked about his past and won votes with his honesty. With 6 Democrat candidates, he finished third in the primary. In 1919, he appeared in 3 silent Western films, one with Vivian Gain. They were The Tryout, A Fugitive's Life, and The Frame-Up. Toward the end of his life, Jennings worked as a traveling evangelist and warned the public against making the choices that he had made.
I have talked all over the land, trying to tell boys that it doesn't pay to commit crime. I don't want them to be criminals. I don't want them to be anything but law-abiding citizens, and I'm giving my every effort to help throughout the United States in dissipating the great crime wave that's now sweeping over the country.
He was a colorful figure who loved publicity, and he relished when Hollywood produced a 1951 movie based on his life entitled Al Jennings of Oklahoma, with Dan Dorea in the title role. As an old man, he continued to make the news, living on his ranch in Tarzana. He once accidentally killed one of his own roosters with his trusty 6-shooter while chasing down an alleged chicken thief. Neighbors called the police on Jennings again when he and actor Hugh O'Brien, who played Wyatt Earp on TV, squared off in a showdown with blanks. In early 1959, while demonstrating to an old friend how he quickly could draw his 6-shooter, Jennings shot Al Graves in the elbow. Al Jennings died in Tarzana the day after Christmas in 1961. He was 98 years old. So now we are going to scour the cemetery and try to find the graves of some noteworthy actors who are buried here. So this was a relatively quick find. It's the grave of the famous Ginger Rogers, who's buried right here with her mother, Leila Owen Rogers, who lived from 1890 to 1977. Ginger herself died in 1995. Ginger, of course, was an actress, a singer. She was born in Independence, Missouri, as Virginia Catherine McMath, but her nickname of Ginger was given by her cousin, who couldn't pronounce her name Virginia correctly. When she was in school, she enjoyed acting, and she moved to New York City, got a job in Broadway production of Top Speed in 1929, and then from there she started getting into film roles. 1929 was A Night in a Dormitory. It was a minor part, but it was the start of her Hollywood career. She had a glittering string of Depression-era musicals with Fred Astaire and helped Americans forget the emptiness of their wallets and the grumbling of their stomachs. She won an Oscar for the 1940 drama Kitty Foyle. From vaudeville to TV to movies, her career spanned 65 years. But when she died in 1995, Ronald Reagan said her male counterpart got the lion's share of publicity, but Ginger Rogers did everything that Fred Astaire did, and did it with high heels on, and did it backwards. Ginger Rogers' fame really took off in 1933 when she starred with Fred Astaire dancing in the movie Flying Down to Rio. That really established her and Fred Astaire as one of the premier dancing couples on the silver screen.
It makes me lose my dignity, it makes me lose my poise. Some folks call it music, my folks call it noise. I lie Music makes me do the things I never should do.
I had a good fortune of writing to Ginger Rogers when she was still living, and I believe she lived up in Rogue River, Oregon. And instead of giving me a free autograph, she charged for it. I'm happy that I did. I sent away for it, and she inscribed a photo for me. So that's pretty cool. And I understand that once you're an old actress or retired, you don't have the funds to spend on sending out 8x10 glossies. So that's a pretty fair trade, I think. So at the top of the hill, backing up to a very scenic backdrop behind us, a little bit off to there's a church over this direction. I don't know if you can see it, but right here is the grave of Gloria Grahame. Now, I know her because I'm a great fan of It's a Wonderful Life. She played Violet Bick in the film, the kind of trashy character who has to leave town suddenly for some reason we don't know. I'm assuming she got herself pregnant, but you might have your own theories about what Violet Bick's problem was. Church is chiming back here. Born Gloria Hallwood in Los Angeles, Gloria began her acting career under the tutelage of her mother. As a teenager on the stage and winning small roles on Broadway, there she was discovered by Louis B. Mayer. She signed a contract with MGM Studios. She made her film debut as Sally in Blonde Fever in 1944, but it is her third film, It's a Wonderful Life, in 1946, that she's often still remembered today. She was actually married 4 times, last time to her former stepson, who was Anthony Ray, in May of 1960, and they divorced in 1974 after having 2 sons. In 1950, she starred with Humphrey Bogart in A Lonely Place, another lone-out role that got her considerable praise, and is often considered her best work, but still, the studio bosses didn't notice her for it. Shortly afterwards, she left RKO. She finally got studio attention with her Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress in The Bad and the Beautiful, 1952. It also won her additional Oscars, making it the highest Oscar-winning film of 1952. Now, I also knew Gloria Grahame from her performance with Shirley Jones in the 1955 musical, Oklahoma.
There won't never be nobody like Will.
Then what about this peddler man?
Oh, there won't never be nobody like him, neither.
Well, you gotta make up your mind. Which one do you like the best?
Well, whatever one I'm with.
In 1980, she was diagnosed with stomach cancer, but she refused surgery. The following year, she went to England for some stage performances, and she had her stomach drained, and that resulted in a perforated bowel, and she collapsed during a stage rehearsal. Despite medical treatment, she was in serious condition. Her children flew her back to New York City, where she died at the age of 57. There's a cute little church here in the cemetery, and I'm going to walk over this direction behind it to an area where there's a celebrity that I want to show you. It's the legendary roper by the name of Monty Montana. I think it's most appropriate that this guy is buried in the scenery around me that has appeared in so many motion pictures and TV shows over the years. But it's the grave of Monty Montana. Now, Roy Rogers called him the greatest trick roper of that age, and I believe that. Monty Montana was known as the guy who would appear in the Rose Parade every year, and he would rope unsuspecting people. But what you may not know is he's probably the only guy who ever got away with roping a president of the United States at his inauguration, and it was in 1953. He had set up ahead of time. Ike had agreed that he would be roped by Monty Montana, who rode up on his horse, threw the lasso around him. However, the Secret Service didn't appreciate what he did, and I think Monty later said it's a good thing that they didn't ventilate him. They could have opened fire on him. It could have gone bad if you think about it. Here you rope the president and maybe the horse spooks, and you end up dragging the president out of his inaugural stand. It had the potential for some disaster. Now, his father, who was a wandering preacher, named his son Owen Harlan Mickle. He was a fixture of the U.S. rodeo circuit from his teenage years, and he used roping and riding skills as his ticket to Hollywood in the early 1930s. In fact, he had a small role in 19 films, including The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance in 1962, and he did stunts in a dozen other films. He was elected to the Rodeo Hall of Fame in 1989. He was 83 when he rode in his 60th and final Rose Parade in 1994. I guess I shouldn't find it odd in any way, shape, or form, but there's plenty of grieving families in these cemeteries visiting the graves of their loved ones, and yet the famous people go unrecognized. So like the Iverson Ranch, with boulders scattered everywhere. Even this cemetery, very close to the Iverson Ranch, has this giant boulder here. So I got to talk about Stephen Boyd, who was a rugged leading actor who made a powerful impression as Messala in Ben-Hur in 1959. That chariot race in that film, in which Boyd dueled to the death with Charlton Heston, is one of the most memorable scenes in American movies. He was cremated, and his remains are interred here at this columbarium, way at the top with that of his wife. Out of the way, I guess nobody probably knows who he is anymore. With his talent, his charisma, and his matinee idol looks, Boyd should have become a major star, but it just never happened. In fact, one movie critic suggested that he was too versatile for his own good. So we parked up the road here a little bit, and we just walked down the hill, and you find the grave of who is arguably the most impressive dancer on the silver screen, that of Fred Astaire. His grave here says, "I will always love you, my darling. Thank you." And somebody's left a penny right here in the O. Somebody's also left some flowers here right over the top of his grave. Fred Astaire was born in Omaha, Nebraska, and entered the show business, vaudeville and stage acts at the age of 5. And he obviously did very well for himself. Just a little bit away from Fred is the grave of Fred's sister, who was also a dancer. Her name was Adele Jurgens Douglas. She died in 1981. So it was in 1905 when she began a successful vaudeville act with her younger brother Fred, developing it into a career on Broadway and the London stage. So while her brother achieved fame and success in Hollywood during the 1930s, Adele gave it serious consideration to making a musical film in 1936 with her brother, but she changed her mind after visiting him and feeling intimidated by his overwhelming reputation. And then over here we have the grave of Johanna, or Anne Astaire, who was Fred's mother. She lived from 1878 to 1975. And also buried here is Phyllis Livingston Astaire, who was Fred's first wife. She died of cancer in 1954. Her marker reads, "I lift mine eyes unto the hills from whence cometh my help." Unfortunately, that passage from Psalms is incorrectly quoted a lot of the time, because it actually says, "I lift mine eyes up to the hills. From where does my help come? My help comes from the Lord who made the heaven and the earth." They had been married 21 years when cancer got her. She left behind 2 children. I'm always impressed by the humble simplicity of grave markers for people who led such legendary lives. You can't get more American than Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. So while there are a lot of celebrities buried in this cemetery who are of a motion picture and TV nature, there's a professional race car driver buried here who lost his life in 1939. Floyd Roberts actually won the 1938 Indianapolis 500, setting a world speed record of 117.2 miles an hour, and I'm sure since then they've broken that record. However, in the following year, in 1939, he was on the back stretch. He was going about 100 miles an hour, and he hit a wooden fence and he was killed. So his fame as a world-class Indianapolis 500 winner did not last long, because he passed away the following year.
Suddenly there's a skid, and Floyd Roberts smashes into Bob Swanson's car, setting it ablaze. Chet Miller crashes through the infield fence and turns turtle. A triple crack-up. Miller is pinned beneath his car. Swanson is thrown clear, and Roberts, mortally hurt, has driven his last race.
His grave is right here. Floyd Marion Roberts, February 12th, 1900 to May 30th, 1939. So he was only 39 years old. The tragic thing that I learned about Mr. Roberts is he was considering giving up speed racing because it was a dangerous sport, and unfortunately he didn't quit fast enough. So there's this cute Catholic church here in the middle of the cemetery. And if you come right over here, we're going to find the grave of Adele Jurgens. She was an actress, she was a model, did some work as a chorus girl before entering B movies in the 1940s. She also played opposites of the likes of Red Skelton and Evan Costello. In 1949, she met and married actor Glenn Landon until his death in 1991. In 1949, she appeared in the film Ladies of the Chorus, playing the role of Marilyn Monroe's mother. She actually appeared in 50 films between 1944 and 1956. They included Jane Eyre, 1944, Black Arrow, 1944, 1001 Nights, a year later, Outlaw Treasure, 1955, The Cobweb, same year, Runaway Daughters in 1956, and Girls in Prison, 1956. I'm sure there's plenty of celebrities that I missed here in this cemetery, but time is a factor in this visit. We want to thank you. I think sometimes it's really fun to go back and rewind history and visit the graves of people who entertained us for so many years, so many decades ago, that many of these people were famous. Perhaps you've had something that resonated with you in this video, maybe a movie star that jarred a memory in your head about your favorite film. Maybe you also had a memorable experience with any of these celebrities. If so, I'd really love to hear your comments. You can also give us a thumbs up and a like. We would always appreciate you joining us on the next adventure on History Hunters. Thank you so much.